I think we're good. Yeah. Jeff? What'd you have for breakfast?
I actually had avocado toast, Dave, like a real millennial.
Now, did you make it or did you pay for it?
I made it
There you go.
because the day job that I go to gets us avocados. So there was avocados. So I bought myself a loaf of bread, and I've been eating avocado toast like a king every day.
They'll buy you avocados, but not bread? Come on.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's so weird.
Come on.
Startup.
All right. So just so you know, starting right now, we are broadcasting. So hopefully.
So anyway, about my breakfast.
That wasn't confidential information, I hope.
It is delicious. A little salt and pepper on top. Lemon juice if I can swing it, but can't always swing it.
You know, I went to an avocado, not an avocado place, a place near my work, and their avocado toast is $9, which I just thought was outrageous.
That's the whole thing, man. That's the whole thing about millennials.
It's $12 in many restaurants in New York too, so it's like it's insane. It's insane.
That's the whole thing. That's why the whole thing about avocado toast happened. If millennials buy avocado toast, that's why they can't buy homes.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
But also, you know, it's
let us
California,
have our avocados.
Avocados are just they're just falling off trees. They're in the street. You know, it's
humble brag. Way to humble brag, Jeff.
We use avocados to clean our gutters.
Well, if you're in the live chat, thanks for tuning in. We are going to start with a review of Velvet Buzzsaw, so let's get going here. Let's just assume I will start recording in 3, 2, 1. That was from the trailer for Velvet Buzzsaw, the newest film by writer-director Dan Gilroy. I'm going to read the plot summary from IMDb. After a series of paintings by an unknown artist are discovered, a supernatural force enacts revenge on those who have allowed their greed to get in the way of art. Joining us today is a very special guest. I'm very excited to welcome on April Wolfe, film critic and host of Switchblade Sisters, to this podcast. April, I've admired your work for quite a while. So glad to have you on the Slash Filmcast today. Welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's really rainy today.
It snowed like 5 to 8 inches in Seattle last night. So what that means if you're in Seattle is that the entire city shuts down. Because we have no infrastructure for dealing with snow. I assume you're living in LA, right?
Oh, yes, I'm in LA. We don't have snow. Ever.
Yeah, but our entire city shuts down when there's rain. So it's basically the same thing.
It's basically the same thing. We're at like equal levels of shutdown right now.
There's no one who had ever imagined that Los Angeles would ever have water from the sky. So nothing was built in anticipation of that. There was no anticipation of precipitation. You know, that's the situation.
Indeed.
So it goes.
Thank you for that, Jeff. So, April, you host a show called Switchblade Sisters at MaximumFun.org. You want to tell our listeners about that show?
Yeah, it's real simple. It's basically every episode me inviting a new female filmmaker on the show, and they pick their favorite genre movie. And then we spend the hour talking about that movie, getting in depth about craft and process. And, I do a lot of research and bring a lot of these old interviews with directors and, other craftspeople on film into it. And it's a really great way to just talk about why people make movies and how they make them.
It's a great podcast. I've listened to many episodes of it. I'd recommend it. Again, you can find it at MaximumFun.org. The title of the podcast is Switchblade Sisters. So, April, speaking of art, this is a movie about art, Velvet Buzzsaw, a satire of the art world. How effective did you find this movie?
I am 50 to 65% sold on this movie. Sometimes if I think about individual scenes, I get more hyped on it. But if I'm looking at it as a whole, then I feel a little bit disappointed. But there are just some knockout bits in here that I really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm. So you're half sold on the movie, is what you're saying? Yeah. I mean, I think that's an interesting way of looking at it because to me, this movie is kind of a blend of two different movies, right? It's a pointed satire of the art world, and it's also a horror film. And I don't know that, like, to me, those things didn't mix super well. But was there a half of the movie? Like, A, do you agree with my construction? And B, was there a half that spoke more to you than the other half?
I do agree with that. And I think that actually the art world satire seemed to speak to me, which doesn't make a lot of sense because I am a horror buff. But I just felt like some of the horror could have used a little bit of help But the comedy sometimes is really wonderful, and I can get into that later on when we're able to do some spoilers or something. But there are some very cutting lines that I just really enjoyed in this.
It's true, and always a great sign when you talk about a movie as in need of help, which, by the way, is a word that I would use to describe this movie as well, or a phrase I'd use to describe this movie. Jeff Kanata.
Mm-hmm.
I assume you've also been to some of the have you been to the Broad Museum and other places depicted in this film?
Indeed, I have.
Yeah.
Indeed,
So what did you think of Velvet Buzzsaw? Did you find it to be a cutting work of satire for the art world?
Well, Dave, I guess you could say my thoughts about this movie would best be summed up in the form of a limerick.
What a shock.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We should probably explain what's going on here to April, who's new to this podcast.
Sure.
Yeah.
Dave has decreed that there shall not ever be an episode of the Slash Filmcast without a limerick.
I don't remember this.
And he gets very angry when there aren't limericks. So it's fallen on me, really, to carry that burden. And I do it dutifully every week, just in fear, mostly, of Dave's rage.
Most of what Jeff just said was a lie, but continue, Jeff.
So here's my my limerick review of Velvet Buzzsaw.
Yeah.
Chief among my complaints, it's tough to mine horror from paint. The art world is ripe for a comedic swipe, but I can't say it's great because it ain't.
Okay. All right. Not bad, Jeff. Not bad.
Thank you.
Solid. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to like this movie, and there are things about it that are good. There are things about it that there are darkly funny moments. There are moments I laughed out loud.
Mm-hmm.
It has got a sense of style and personality that is unique, and I dig that. But ultimately, it really doesn't add up to anything. It doesn't have much to say. The horror elements, as we already have talked about, are kind of flaccid and toothless. There's some fun kills and fun horror things, but none of them go as far as they could, or I wasn't having as much fun as I wanted to be having with that part of it.
Yeah.
And I felt like it could have gone way farther. And ultimately, we'll get to this in spoilers, but ultimately my biggest complaint about this entire movie is that it's saying something that's really pat and not particularly insightful. And when you kind of step through the logic of the movie, it doesn't really make much sense. And the sense that it does make is like, oh, okay, all right. I just wish there was more to it.
Yeah. April, I'm sorry, you were trying to chime in there. What were you trying to say?
Oh, I just love the pun. It's toothless. That's
nice. Jeff, I'm sure
I didn't even know I was doing that.
You're making puns while you didn't even know it, Jeff.
Yeah. It was a little soft and toothless because the velvet thing.
Nice. Sounds like it didn't really work for you either, Jeff. Devindra, how about you?
Yeah, pretty much in agreement with you guys. I do think this movie could have cut a little deeper. And I think that's the main thing, right? Because this is it's a killer premise. It's an amazing cast. You have Jake Gyllenhaal kind of going all in with another weirdo character. And after Nightcrawler, I'm all aboard. Whatever Jake Gyllenhaal and Dan Gilroy do together, because that movie, I love that movie so much. And this movie just feels like wasted potential, purely wasted potential. There's some funny bits. The art world commentary is fine. There are definitely some great jokes around that, and the horror stuff is kind of fun. It's as if you made a whole movie about the painting from Ghostbusters 2, right? It's just what if
Vigo,
it could actually, it's just all Vigo. What if he could just come out and murder people? That's kind of fun, I guess. But it's he just didn't go that extra mile to make this more interesting and more, I don't know, more exciting too. This movie's almost 2 hours long. I feel like if it was tightened up and everything was just a little sharper, it would definitely have a bigger impact. And that's the big thing. I'm just mostly disappointed. We kind of wasted this entire premise and this amazing cast.
Yeah, in my opinion, this is a bad film. It's an early contender for one of the worst films of 2019. I'm glad we saw it. I don't have any regrets because you got, like you said, you got Dan Gilroy, who I didn't see Roman J. Esquire, but Nightcrawler was one of my favorite films of that year. Amazing cast here. Robert Elswit doing the cinematography, right? This had all the ingredients for a winning film, but unfortunately, it's not, in my opinion. There is a scene at some point in this movie where a art person, a professional art, I think he's a buyer or curator or something, walks up to several bags of garbage and says, "It's brilliant." And then John Malkovich, who plays an artist, says, "That's not art," and it's like, I see. What a delightful skewering of the art world. I mean, we've seen.
By the way, John Malkovich, I guess, is just like randomly exploring all the Netflix sets. He's just like, I'm gonna hang out at this movie for 5 minutes. I'm gonna go over there.
He's gonna be in Bird Box. Yeah,
it's fine. Just keep paying me. Yeah,
that is about as incisive as the art world criticism gets in this film. And when I say that, I mean that scene, which we've seen in probably, I don't know, a couple dozen other movies about the art world. In virtually every art world movie. Or movie about modern art, there is something about like, people are mistaking garbage or something, in the environment as art. I feel like I saw that scene play out like when I was a kid in movies, right? So the fact that we're still returning back to that is kind of disappointing. I think.
I agree, Dave, by the way, but I will say like the way this movie portrays certain art events, like I cackled when I saw they was opening it at Art Basel in Miami, because that's one weird like art thing I've actually been to. And it is exactly that. It is people at the front shouting about how they can't get in. It's my name's on the list. Of course, this is ridiculous. And going through a lot of exhibitions that are just like kind of dumb, kind of meaningless, and trying to see everybody try to wrap their heads around it and try to find meaning in meaningless, or I don't know, just like things that may seem meaningless on the surface. But yeah.
But also the movie is trying to have its cake and eat it too, because, and we'll get more into this in spoilers, but I think ultimately it comes down on the side of art and trying to say that like, crass commercialism is the problem. True art isn't. But it's talking out of both sides of its mouth and not really making a point in either case, I think.
I think it's a movie by people who hate modern art, or, specifically Dan Gilroy, I guess, hates modern art and the world around it and the accoutrement of it, and everything in this movie is informed by that perspective. And, that's fine. Of course, whatever. Modern art might deserve a good skewering, but this movie I don't think had anything new to add to that skewering, which we've seen many times before already.
I think there's a more subtle point, though. I don't think it's a movie by people who hate modern art.
Yes,
I think it's a movie that made by people that hate the modern art industrial complex.
Oh, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
But I think that they're trying to say that art is beautiful, and the monetization of it, the selling of it is somehow despicable.
I don't know. I actually, you know what? I've revised what I just said in response to what you just said, Jeff. I actually don't think that's true. I think it actually does hate modern art. I think it thinks of modern art as fairly intellectually bankrupt, and I think it throws in a lot of real world references to like show its street cred, like the Art Basel thing in Miami, and there's real artists that are alluded to in this movie. But then when you look at the actual modern art that's on display in the movie, there's like GoPro Kindergarten, right? It's like, we're strapping GoPros onto kids and putting the video on this thing, and I think it is clearly made by someone who thinks that modern art is stupid.
It's kind of tough to like. Now we're assuming we're understanding what they think, right, or what Dan Gilroy is thinking. I think enough of this movie shows that it is there's a purity of art that he's clamoring for. So I don't know if I could say like he hates all modern art.
Well, I think I'll say one other thing about it, which is like my wife saw this film, and she has spent multiple years of her life critiquing art, writing about art. Like she studied it as like academically, and she thought the art in this movie was very bad. And I said, well, how do you know? Like, how do you know it was intentionally bad? And she just expressed that one had to know. It's like if you were watching A Star Is Born, and instead of Shallows, they sang "Mary Had a Little Lamb," right? It's like, anyone who knows what music is would know that this actually sounds terrible, and it's written by a person.
It could also just be he doesn't like. We could say he doesn't understand it maybe completely, right? Like Shallows was written by an actual singer, and like a lot of people who understand music. It wasn't just Bradley Cooper writing a song.
Oh yeah,
on
so
his
you're saying
own
it could be
and everything.
incompetent versus malice.
Yeah,
is what-
it's just like he's just
Could be
doesn't
incompetence
fully
as well.
understand.
But
Oh, yeah.
I like how Dave, like, you're just going straight to the harshest potential view of everything right now. But,
definitely. April, what are your thoughts on kind of how art itself is portrayed in this film?
I think, also like the idea that we are ascribing intention to the filmmaker is, kind of a murky area to get into because we can't really do that unless they said something in the interviews. I didn't see it as coming off that he hated art. However, I do think that it's a good point that I think Jeff brought up when, it's just saying that the industrial complex of it is, despicable. But I think that they really did try to make some interesting art for it because you can see it with, and, this isn't a spoiler because it's in the trailer, there is a sphere piece that's in it. And that's kind of treated with a kind of reverence by both the characters and the story as something that they found very interesting. So there's a few times when the art comes off as, not so bad. But yeah, it's incompetence of, like, how can you get real modern artists? Like, that's a pet peeve of like most of the things that I think about. Modern art in most movies is terrible. You always have like a picture, like an artist or just like, oh, they're supposed to be amazing, but no one can actually recreate the modern art that's amazing because it's such a difficult thing to do. Right. I think David Cronenberg was probably the only person I can think of who did a great job for his movies recreating modern art.
So I think that's a great point. I think that's a great point, April. And yeah, I guess I should take it back a bit because I think the sphere was in fact very good. And I also think there's a moment when you look at a painting that the John Malkovich character makes, and it is meant to be bad. And I think the movie sufficiently conveys that it is bad. You know what I mean?
Also, I mean, we're kind of getting into spoilers, but there's a Daveed Diggs character.
Right.
His entire purpose of being there is to show that modern art can be laudable and noble.
Yes.
He's pure, right?
He's Ryan Gosling in La La Land.
He doesn't sell out, right? He doesn't sell out. And that's the point that the movie is making is don't sell out, don't make art for money. And the problem is everyone in the movie that wants to profit off of it without actually being creative are the evil ones, are the people worthy of being, in a horror movie.
All right, I'm back on your side again. I think you're right. I think all of you are right. All of you are right. I take it back.
It's been a real roller coaster ride.
It has been. It has been. But why don't we get to spoilers for Velvet Buzzsaw starting?
Wait, before we get there.
Yep.
Can I just say, like, shout out to whatever the hell Jake Gyllenhaal is doing in this performance. I think it's a ton of fun. Like, even if the movie doesn't quite come together, I think this whole thing, this whole act, it's very much a send up of snooty critics, but I can't help but feel a bit of like film critic, like commentary there too. There's a point where he says to somebody, "Whatever respect I had for your work has completely evaporated." In this complete tone that is hilarious. I was laughing so much.
But there's never been a critic alive that has a body like that.
I'm very confused. I'm very confused by a lot of things, and I love that this movie also gives him plenty of naked moments just to like hang out and be naked, because that's exactly how I write. I guess that's how we all work.
That's how we do the Slash Filmcast. We're all
you don't know.
No, you got that memo, right, April? That we're all supposed to.
Yeah. So there are many great quotes by the Jake Gyllenhaal character, whose name is Morph Vanderwalt in the movie.
Great names in this movie too.
Yeah.
Morph.
I like the phrase critique is so limiting and emotionally draining. It's kind of how I feel every time I record the Slash Filmcast. So many quotes from Morph that I'll probably integrate into my daily life. So good shout out.
I want to listen to Morph's podcast because I think that would be awesome.
Morph's podcast would be great.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to spoilers for Velvet Buzzsaw starting right now.
All right, Dave, I want to complete my thought on my thesis here.
Complete your
because
thought.
I think bizarrely the most important scene in this entire movie is played over the end credits as Netflix is attempting to transition me into the next show.
Sure.
Which is stupid and unfortunate. But I think that's the most important scene in the whole movie is John Malkovich, alive and well, making art for himself on the beach, not dead because he's embraced the free nature of art and the exercise of creating it just for yourself, just for the world, without monetizing it, and creating something beautiful on the beach that's transitory and will be swept away by the sea. And I think that's the thesis of the entire movie, is like, the people that die are the ones that monetize it, and the people that live, like Daveed Diggs and John Malkovich, are the ones that make it for its own sake. And it's such a pat, I think, easy thesis, but I think it's the thesis of the movie.
Yeah, for sure. This movie has a good justification for who dies, better than, like, say, Jurassic World or something, right? Like, that's something. That's a good comparison, right? All right?
Yeah. Two very comparable movies. Yeah. April, what do you think? You agree with that formulation of the point of the movie?
The Jurassic World? Yeah. No, I think that's like very clearly the intention to derive from it. And I'm okay with it being so simple, because I do like that kind of simplicity, especially in my horror films. And this is partially the horror. So.
Well, let's talk about the horror aspects of it. I mean, in my opinion, the horror elements of this movie are completely ineffective. And actually, it filled me with dread, because the first or second time a horror scene occurs, I was just completely not scared at all. And I thought it was kind of cheesy, some of the ways that this plays out, and not particularly
I do think that is the point, by the way. Like, the glory of this movie is that it would be a cheesy as all hell B-movie send-up that is both maybe not scary, but there's a lot of campy horror movies that aren't scary. And I think it's trying to do that, and it's still failing at that.
I guess it doesn't go far enough in that direction, though, in my opinion. Like, it's if you want it to be like super cheesy, like the rest of the movie is like lit in such, just like the lighting is lit in such a way it's like kind of like almost like a straight drama or a thriller. And
it's a movie called Velvet Buzzsaw, and I feel like when you hear that, you're like, that's hilarious, isn't it?
I don't know. I didn't have that. I think we're interpreting the intentions of the filmmaker differently. It was a situation where I was filled with dread watching the first couple scenes and seeing how they played out, and being completely unscared and unaffected by them, and knowing that I'd have to sit through 5 or 6 more of these things where these critics die in increasingly outlandish and drawn out ways. Yeah. I just found it to be completely ineffective for me. But April, what did you think of the actual horror aspects? Right, like, were you scared at all? Did you find it to be well done? Did any of it speak to you?
I'm rarely scared at horror films, so I have a hard time judging that. It's usually just whether or not something is creative.
Yeah.
And in this one, I think it kind of failed. I think one of the first deaths didn't really seem clear to me what was happening. And I think that was something that kind of prevented me from getting into the fun of it. Because I do agree. I think it is supposed to be camp. And I think that there's a really great place for camp, especially, the idea that you're doing kind of like a B-movie ripoff of something that's so highbrow.
Yep.
I love that kind of premise. I love camp in this. But it's just, I almost feel like they just didn't go far enough in these things. Like they just weren't creative enough. And I think that's where people who actually make a lot of horror, they have a better understanding of what's been seen and what hasn't been seen yet.
My bigger problem, and I think this speaks to what you just said, April, about the clarity, is they have this really awesome idea that we get to at the end, but it's not set up and paid off effectively, right? The big idea that is actually cool when you think about it, and the reason the movie is named Velvet Buzzsaw is the final death is, oh my God, she tried to get away from art because art's going to kill her, but she had a tattoo, and that is art. Oh, she can't get away because it's on her body, and that kills her, right? That is a very cool idea.
Yeah.
But the first time we see the way that's all set up is crazy, scary dude who has checkered past and weird psychological issues, makes these insanely kind of disturbing images, and those are imbued with some magic that can kill people. Except the first time that a painting kills someone, it's not one that he made. It's the monkey painting in the rest stop. So it's muddled already of like, well, is that supposed to be one of his paintings? Because
Mhm.
his paintings are the evil magic that is killing people. But no, what we learn is all art will kill you
Well,
for
his
some
paintings
reason.
are sort of like infecting the other art or
Yes,
something.
but none of that
Yeah.
is clear, and that
Yeah.
could have been a cool reveal. That you start with his paintings are killing people, and then Jake Gyllenhaal's trying to get rid of all the Dees. He's going into this thing and trying to get rid of the Dees because the Dees are what's evil. And then you find out, no, all art can kill you. And then you get to, even that tattoo can kill you. But that progression, that reveal, that path of revelation that would be fun and interesting and clever is completely broken and doesn't pay off like that because it's just muddled and unclear.
100% agree, Jeff. I think the fact that the movie doesn't do a very good job establishing the rules, and really, like, to lead with that kill of that guy at the gas station, I think is just very confusing, right? Because it's like,
Yes.
okay, why is there a painting of these monkeys in this gas station, and then the monkeys are killing him, and like, what's going,
Listen,
Yeah,
have
is
you
that a
not been to
Dees?
gas stations with art? They exist. Come on.
Yeah, we're like, did the Dees painting like lead him to this gas station that has another Dees painting in it?
Right.
That was
Yeah.
what I was thinking. But I agree that the movie really missed an opportunity to kind of build up and make it clear what each death represents. Right. That like
Right.
usually for these movies, like the method of dispatching the people is in some way tied with their inherent flaws, right? Like it's in some way like a reflection on them, whereas versus just like, generically it's art that's killing them, right? Or I mean that's what happens in this case. It would have been interesting if like the art piece that killed them was in some way related to their biggest flaw as a human or something like that,
But also, I had the thought. So at the end, Rene Russo gets the brilliant thought, even though it's not set up in any way. But she gets the brilliant thought of, I'm going to just remove all the art from my house,
Right.
right? But then I thought, isn't architecture art? Isn't her house
yeah.
itself a piece of art? Isn't
It
that
is. On a
isn't that
cliffside.
cactus? That cactus in her, isn't that artfully grown and display? Like that whole concept could have been a really cool thing to explore. Like what is art and what isn't? But this movie just is uninterested and it like misses the point entirely on that.
I feel like for this movie to really, for it to really lean into camp, this would have been a good like Sam Raimi idea or something. Like I'm thinking of back when like the last good, fun, campy thing he's done, like Drag Me to Hell, which is an awesome movie, still rocks. But it's like, yeah, we've completely forgotten about it. And Sam Raimi's moved on to other stuff now.
Yeah, but in Drag Me to Hell, right? The kind of cheesy horror elements were
There's
of
a curse,
piece,
yeah.
were of a piece with the rest of the movie, right? In this movie, I feel like they just didn't fit quite as well.
Yeah, I agree. We agree, but you're trying to ascribe intention here, Dave. And I'm saying that is exactly what this movie is trying to do. It fails at it.
Oh
But
yeah,
it is
no.
trying to combine this highbrow and cultist.
Yeah, I think I'm agreeing with you that is. I'm agreeing with you that it attempted that and did not succeed at doing that. But that said, April, in our earlier discussion, you had alluded to some things or some moments from the movie that really worked for you, and I'm wondering if there's any more of those that you can recall at this moment.
I mean, I think it's just the little drop-in lines that they have. Like, for instance, I'm really happy that someone called out the mispronunciation of the Broad, which is just, it's so dumb, but it's something you feel like you should correct people if you're from LA. And it's like, why am I doing this? And I actually quite enjoyed the dumb joke of the woman who was explaining how Toni Collette's body was on the floor at the museum, like over the phone.
Yes,
That's the best part of the movie. It's so funny.
It's so, and they were splashing around, and it like just keeps going and going, and I'm like, yes, this is what I want from this movie.
That's
And the
another
running
sequence,
gag-
by the way, it should have been longer. It should have been more like we should have seen all that.
Yeah.
I think.
And the running gag of the assistant girl who constantly discovers the dead bodies, that's a really funny idea. Like
Yeah.
she goes from job to job and every time she discovers the dead body, but like nothing is made of it.
Well,
it's
no. At the
wasted.
end, she's out. She's out of that town.
Yeah,
She's on a
but
plane.
I don't
Like
know,
that.
it
That's the joke, basically. Yeah.
still felt like only a half of something,
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, folks. Any other thoughts on this movie? What worked, what didn't work, or shall we bring it to an end? I think overall, Some of us liked it more than others. Most of you liked it more than me, but I think we all agree that it tried to do some things that it didn't quite succeed at. Yes?
Well, can you guys think of any movies that have attempted something similar and may have worked better? Like, I do think, in a weird way, like maybe not like straight horror, but I love the way like Phantom Thread kind of combined like this high art plus like thriller concept. Like there are ways to do this, and I think this movie just completely failed. Somebody on Twitter had also mentioned Jeremy Saulnier's Murder Party, which is a very similar sort of premise. Actually, it's not high art, but it's about a party being held for the sake of crazy people's art. It's such great material. I wish they had done more.
There's the movie that resonates for me, and this may be weird, you guys may not agree, but is L.A. Story.
Yeah.
The Steve Martin movie, where it's like everything's a little heightened and bizarre, and it's skewering. I mean, there isn't really horror, but there's the supernatural thing happening, and it's skewering the sort of culture of people who are self-absorbed, so.
Mm-hmm.
I think my favorite movie about modern art is My Kid Could Paint That. Honestly,
oh yeah,
the movie
so
came out
good.
a long time ago, but
Sure.
it starts as a documentary about this child who's making these works of modern art that are theoretically worth millions, and it ends up being an exploration of the notion of art itself and of documentary itself. I thought it was a fascinating film and would recommend it. That movie came out in 2007.
And that part where the sculpture eats that kid's arm
is so
man.
crazy. I'm surprised they
It-
put it in the documentary, but it deserved to be in there. April, any movies you'd recommend instead of Velvet Buzzsaw?
It's tough to think about specifically modern art movies, but if you're thinking about like other art movies, I do think that Todd Solondz' movie from like 2001, I think, Storytelling.
Yeah.
Since I'm a big Todd Solondz fan, and people can usually take him or leave him, but I'm a super fan. And I think Storytelling was really wonderful for its kind of dry wit of exploring MFA programs and writers and just tearing that whole thing apart. And also Selma Blair is so good in that movie, and I would highly recommend that one instead.
All right, Storytelling from 2001. I have not seen it, but sounds really interesting based on the description. So I will try to check it out. I think that's going to wrap us up for today from the perspective of our review of Velvet Buzzsaw. You can find more episodes of this podcast at /filmcast.com. Email us at /filmcast@gmail.com. Our theme song comes from AdamWarrock.com. Our spoiler bumper comes from filmmaker Kyle Hillinger. And our /film court music comes from SimonMHarris.com. Stay tuned to hear what we'll be discussing next week, as well as our Burning After Dark episode. But in the meantime, April Wolf, where can people find more of your work on the internet this week?
Well, since I write for a lot of places, people can follow me at @awolfful on Twitter, and I always post everything that I write there.
Very cool. And be sure to check out April's podcast, Switchblade Sisters, at MaximumFun.org. Jeff Kanata, where can people find more of your work on the internet?
Well, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Jeff Kanata, which is spelled with 2 N's and 1 T. I also do a video game podcast called DLC. You can find that wherever you download podcasts or at 5by5.tv/DLC.
Devindra Hardware?
You can find me on Twitter at Devindra, and I write about tech at Engadget.com. I'm on paternity leave this month, though, so I probably won't be around there much, but I'm also doing my Tech Q&A podcast at nomortech.net. That's no with a K.
And find my stuff at youtube.com/Dave Chensky. That's youtube.com/Dave Chensky. Dave Chen SKY. I'm going to be trying to make 2 YouTube videos per month at least for the year 2019. And there's already some good stuff there, so check it out. Next week, we'll be discussing... Well, we haven't confirmed what we're going to be discussing next week yet. So I'll probably have to put this in later on. Beatty, our producer, will help me with that. But thanks for listening. We'll see you. Let's retag that last part again. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the /Filmcast. We'll see you later. Okay. Cool. So that's it. We're still broadcasting live, but we are no longer, what's being said right now will not make it into the final episode. April, thanks so much for joining us for the review.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was a bit of reason to watch Velvet Buzzsaw by myself in the morning.
Well, I'm sorry to have inflicted that on you, but I appreciate you showing up anyway. And glad we could finally make this happen, and hope to do it again sometime.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thanks, guys.
All
Take
right.
care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so let's talk about what we're going to be discussing next week.
Okay, I guess we kind of have to do Cold Pursuit now, huh?
I was thinking the opposite.
Jesus.
I was thinking the opposite. That's right.
Why? Okay. I could go either way.
I've seen Lego Movie 2, and I love it with the whole heart.
They're neck and neck with each other on Rotten Tomatoes right now. So Cold Pursuit is winning, technically. Weird.
Oh man.
Yeah.
This is tough, guys.
I think I have to see it now.
I don't think the Liam Neeson's recent publicity tour has anything to do with how good Cold Pursuit is, though.
Not at all. Something to comment on. This is the movie he chooses to make that revenge comment to. Oh, Jesus.
Jeff, do you have any preference?
Well, I've already seen Lego Movie 2, so
I'm fine doing Lego Movie 2.
That's your preference?
Just to make your life easier. Yeah.
How about this? How about we say Lego Movie 2, but then Devindra, you and I can try to see Cold Pursuit.
Yeah, I have time this week, so
Okay.
I'll try to see it too. I'll see if I can.
All right, let's say we're gonna do the Lego Movie 2, and then if we can see Cold Pursuit, great. But if not, don't worry. Or the people who see Cold Pursuit, we can do it as what we've been watching, right? If or After Dark, whatever you prefer, if that's the case. Cool?
Yep.
Cool.
Is that cool?
Yep.
All right, so let me just redo that last part. Tune in next week. We'll be reviewing the Lego Movie 2, the second part, here on the Slash Filmcast. And we may try to squeeze in a bonus episode or a bonus review of Cold Pursuit. Maybe it'll be in what we've been watching, but that should be fun. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Slash Filmcast. We'll see you later. Okay. Okay, now... what we've been watching and Slash Film Court. Jeff, is there anything you've been watching?
Lego Movie 2 and Alita Battle Angel. So
Okay,
basically,
so
I don't need to say anything about either of those. But
that's another thing. Are you Jeff? I'm sorry, Devindra. Are you seeing Alita this week?
Yes. Yeah, I am. Thursday.
I'm going to try to see Alita tomorrow night. So maybe we could do like a double review next week and then knock out 2 episodes.
That'd be
That's
rad.
cool.
Although I know Devindra, you said you wanted to have your guest on for Alita, so I don't know.
I could just see if he can make it then too, just for the bonus part.
Yeah, that would be cool. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we could knock out like 2 episodes next week.
That'd be awesome.
Give me rough timing to tell him when to show
I'll
up,
do
basically.
that. We probably just start with it then. We probably just start with Alita Battle Angel review.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then I don't know. It'll be a shorter episode that week.
Yeah.
I also want to point out, like, we're broadcasting, but this is not gonna make it into the recording. But I do want to point out that we have moved on to a new host. I've been doing like a fairly solid amount of work in the that you guys aren't aware of to get us onto this new platform. But we are now on the new platform. We're now officially with Acast.com, and all our future episodes will be served by then. Beatty went back to all of our previous episodes from the last 6 to 12 months and took note of of all the moments where we have ads and then re-timed all those episodes in the new platform to insert ads into the new episodes or into the the new platform episodes.
Okay.
So we're very grateful to her for that. And she will be listening to this right now as I'm saying this because she's going to have access to this recording, and just know that we're very grateful. But yeah, so soon the ad should start pretty soon. And the way they do it, as far as I know, is that they like sell on the whole back catalog. So they don't. There will be like host read ads like before, but they're also going to just be putting ads in like the last like 6 weeks of episodes or however long.
That's cool.
So I don't know how it's going to play out, but we'll see. But I think. I have been treated very well by them so far, and we'll see what happens. So that's that. But there's going to be like a couple months. There's going to be a couple months when we're just figuring shit out. So
thanks for all the hard work.
Yeah, no problem. I'll keep you in the loop. We'll see what happens. Like they know this is an important time period for both of us to see what we're made of. So okay. What we've been watching, Devindra's seen Russian Doll.
Yep.
I've seen 2 episodes of that show.
Yeah, it's real good.
Is there
I
anything?
really want to watch it.
I wasn't a huge fan of it, but is there anything else we want to talk about in what we've been watching?
I still haven't finished
Trying to think.
Escape
yeah.
is
Escape. Yeah, so I'll wait and do that when I'm done. But there is something that I found out about it that is mind blowing. But I can wait till.
Is it about
I'm
the
done.
real life story?
No.
Which episode are you at? Just out of curiosity.
5, I believe.
Oh, okay. Okay, gotcha. So we have a slash film court here. I'm trying to see if there's anything else we want to discuss. Yeah, no, I don't got anything.
I'll mention Steven Universe as well, because that just had a season finale.
Just give me a second here.
Mm-hmm.
I rewatched The Sixth Sense recently. That's the thing. I don't know if that's worth talking about. but
It's still good.
it's still pretty good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have to say.
My kid talks to himself at night in the dark. And
Nice.
says some shit that makes me think it's like Sixth Sense, dude. Let me 1 second. I gotta look this up. My wife texted me.
Like Roma, right?
Yeah.
Like
Well, at night to himself is even worse.
Yeah, it's to no one. It's there's no one there. He's talking in his room by himself to, I assume, the ghosts he sees, the dead people he sees.
It's cool. It's cool.
Hang on, I gotta read this to you. Hang on.
do we want to save this for the podcast?
I don't think so. I mean, if you want.
You just play it on the podcast. Yeah. This is what Jeff has been watching.
I've been watching my son.
His haunted child.
So this is what my wife texted me that he said. Don't pull my hair. Don't pull my hair. That's a no-no. My dad is at work. Where's my mama?
Whoa.
Right?
What? You just have some more cameras in there, Jeff.
I know.
That's pretty good.
And then the other night, we were both home, and we're in our bedroom, and we hear him saying, like, "You're in the corner. You can't see me. You're in the corner." And I was like, "It's this fucking I see dead people shit," is what this is. He's talking to the ghosts in his room. So
Good luck. Good luck sleeping tonight, Jeff.
yeah.
Yeah.
So at least you guys will know what happened to me.
I
was the
do
painting.
think there is like a, you know, that like that movies in which like a child kills a parent, you know, would take on a much greater level of horror for me, if I had a kid, you know, because the idea that there's this like
Right.
creature in your house
Oh, yeah.
that
Yeah.
if it has bad impulse control could murder you, you know, it's a pretty terrifying thought.
Yeah,
The
it's
whole
like
hook of Sinister. Yeah.
if you knew an 8-foot tall guy with a machete, you'd probably be more scared of the Jason movie.
The
you know?
Jason
Yeah.
movies.
Nobody suspects the children.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, why don't we start it off?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Slash Filmcast. I'm David Chen, and with me are... Hello, Devindra? Did we lose you?
Sorry. Can you hear me? Skype's mute button, guys. It's awesome.
Yep.
It works really well.
Let's try that again.
Let's do that again.
Let's try that again. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Slash Filmcast. I'm David Chen, and with me are...
Devindra Hardwar.
And Jeff Kanata.
Welcome to the show. What we're going to do here on today's podcast is we're going to have a very brief what we've been watching segment and then move on into a Slash Film Court segment, which is the segment whereby we adjudicate a film-related dilemma. You can always email us at slashfilmcast@gmail.com. And then finally conclude with an in-depth review of Velvet Buzzsaw, the new Dan Gilroy movie that's out on Netflix right now. April Wolf, film critic, is going to join us for that review of Velvet Buzzsaw. And then if that's not enough Slash Filmcast goodness for you, we're going to follow it up with an After Dark episode about Burning, the thriller drama starring Steve Yeun, and also Dan Gvozden is going to join us for that part of the episode. So lots to get to on this week's episode of the podcast, lots in store for you. Stay tuned. You can find more episodes at slashfilmcast.com. Email us at slashfilmcast@gmail.com. But let's get to what we've been watching. Devindra Hardawar, what have you been watching this week?
I've been checking out Russian Doll, the new show on Netflix, starring Natasha Lyonne and co-created by Natasha Lyonne, Amy Poehler, and Leslie Headland. And you may, if you saw Bachelorette, I think back in 2013 or so, she directed that movie and wrote that. So she's been somebody I've been keeping an eye on for a while, and I know she's been doing TV. This show is it's kind of tough to describe. I will say it is Groundhog Day-esque, and it stars Natasha Lyonne, and the entire thing is about her trying to determine why this crazy thing is happening to her on a drunken night. I think what really sells the show, though, is basically Natasha Lyonne being, a badass, being irreverent, being hilarious. I think this show works as a great comedy, but also as it goes on, I'm about 2 episodes away from the end. It's only 8 episodes. It's trying to dive into deeper and more meaningful stuff. But mostly I'm struck by how much fun the show is to watch. We started it, and before I knew it, we were watching, half the season. It's only 4 half-an-hour episodes. It goes by really quickly because it's just a movie length. But it's
I think
eminently
it's 8
bingeable.
episodes, actually. 8 episodes.
Yeah. I saw 4.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay,
I saw 4 half-hour episodes.
got it.
And yeah, you just blow through that real quick. So yeah, it's an easy watch. It's a ton of fun. If you've appreciated Natasha Lyonne, it's definitely worth watching. But I also think it's a really fun mix-up of the Groundhog Day formula, and also to me it's a real reminder of how lasting that concept is. We've just seen it redone so many times, and I think it's just going to continue indefinitely, which kind of makes sense. But it's a great conceit, and I think that the show's just a ton of fun. But what did you think, Dave?
So I saw the first 2 episodes of Russian Doll. I thought the first episode was great. I thought it's, like you said, it is a concept that has stood the test of time. There's been many movies like it in the past. I'm thinking of, obviously, Groundhog Day, 1201 with Jonathan Silverman. There's another movie I'm going to mention later on. That
yeah, sure, kind of okay.
Yeah. And I thought the first episode was really enjoyable, and then the second episode really kind of almost I didn't get past the second episode because I'm I don't know if I'm going to keep watching this, because when you have a Groundhog Day style show or movie or whatever, there's always a moment when the protagonist says, "Am I crazy? What's going on with me here?" And they just try to figure out what is actually happening. What are the physics and mechanics of what's actually happening? And in a movie, that part of the movie is 10 minutes, right? And this show stretched that out into half an hour, where the character's just what's going on? And I just the episode 2 felt like it did not advance the plot whatsoever. Right. And I'm just I don't know if I can deal with the entire series being like this. But you've made it to episode 4.
It's not
you
not all like
keep
that.
Going. You suggest I keep
I
going.
will say this year it kind of makes sense why she's going on this huge exploration of why this whole thing is happening, because she's also she's kind of a heavy drinker. She takes all sorts of drugs. Conceivably it could be anything in her system that's kind of making this happen psychologically. So it's it's a scientific method, Dave.
And she explores all of those
out.
possibilities in episode 2, right? Yeah.
Yes.
But speaking of movies like this, I watched another really weird time-bending movie this past week that also was a bit rough in my opinion, and it was. Have you guys heard of this movie called Plus One? I
no.
wrote this. I do this other podcast about writing and the creative process with C. Robert Cargill. It's called Write Along at writealongpodcast.com. That's WRITE. And the question that we discussed this week was, how do you make a low budget movie that takes place in one location that's just a few characters, right? You can't afford that many actors, you can't afford that many locations. What do you do? And his suggestion, which I thought was very smart, was you basically make a film that has a super high concept, sci-fi premise, big idea kind of thing. And that way, the special effect is happening in the audience's head, right? That the audience is being oh, we're not watching people in a shack behind the filmmaker's house. We're watching two people have this interaction in space, or whatever it is, right? Like that you have something so high concept that like the audience is doing work to build the world for you. And
it also works, it doesn't have to be sci-fi too. If you think of a movie like Reservoir Dogs, it's basically, there's this grand action heist thing that all happens in your imagination.
That's right.
Because all the characters are in this, very cheap one location, but they talk about what just happened out there in the crazy heist.
Great example. Another example we brought up was The One I Love, which is the Mark Duplass, Elizabeth Moss film directed by Charlie McDowell. It's the vast majority of it is just those two actors.
Love that
movie. There is like a very interesting sci-fi premise to it that kind of, it's very interesting. It allows those two actors to kind of strut their stuff. Anyway, so another movie I watched was Plus One, this movie that Cargill recommended. I did not like that movie, but I liked the concept of it, which is that a temporal event makes it so that these characters are transported back 15 minutes ago, right? So that you see yourself from 15 minutes ago, right? And then the movie explores like what would happen if you encountered.
I have to listen to this podcast, 15 minutes of us talking about stuff I just said.
I know, it would be horrifying. And in fact, it is horrifying in the movie. Like it has a very bleak view on human nature. But the movie is pretty rough. It kind of is at its edges, or not even at its edges. It's like a fairly misogynist movie from my perspective. Like, it objectifies women in a pretty intense way, and then it's all beyond that. It's by the guy who directed like Last House on the Left, the new one. Do you guys ever see that movie? That horror thriller is pretty brutal movie. Similarly, there's some brutality in this movie as well, but it was just crazy because that's a movie that I love, that kind of movie, right? Like Triangle, right? Movies or time crimes, movies that play with time and stuff like that. And I'd never heard of this movie. But if that sounds remotely interesting to you, I can't vouch for the movie, but it is a cool concept. And the movie is called Plus One. It's directed by Dennis Iliadis, and you can find it on a video on demand platform. So that's another like kind of time-bending movie I happened to watch this week, as the same week I watched Russian Doll. But Devindra, overall, it sounds like you're having a good time. You're gonna get it all the way to the end of Russian Doll. Yes?
Oh, it's a blast! Like I've talked to people who've just basically watched the entire thing in one night because it's effectively
like
4 hours.
Yeah, it's like 4 hours. Yeah,
it's easy to do. It's so much fun, and I would say don't read reviews. Don't go read anything about it. Just kind of go experience it right now.
Very cool. That's Russian Doll. It's on Netflix right now. Devindra, anything else you've been watching?
Yeah, quick shout out to Steven Universe. Just finished season 5. I raced to catch up everything. This is the Cartoon Network show by Rebecca Sugar about a boy named Steven and these super-powered aliens that he kind of teams up with to save the world on a daily basis. It's a really fun show. I've talked about it before. It's so much fun, such a blast. And this is also a show with like a deep mythology, similar to like Avatar: The Last Airbender or something. And this season, they kind of go all in on it. It kind of goes cosmic. I just want to say, if you've started Steven Universe and kind of fell off, it is definitely worth picking it back up. It's a series that's kind of, there's so many like anime references in here too. And I kind of love when an American show ends up doing that because I'm of the generation that grew up watching, major anime movies. And I love seeing these creators who kind of had that same experience kind of applied to their own art as well. In season 5, like we're getting some Akira here. We're getting some like crazy Voltron action from Steven Universe. It's a ton of fun. And also like, I just love the message of the show. It's always been about inclusivity and good winning over evil. And this is definitely a show where, let's just say a lot of the villains end up becoming friends in some ways or allies. And I think that's a really important message for today. So really dig that. Check it all out. It's on demand if you have a Cartoon Network. I don't think it's I think Hulu has the first 4 seasons right now. So you'd have to catch up in season 5 some other way. But yeah, you can watch it on Hulu up until season 5.
All right, that's Steven Universe, and it's available on demand right now. And that is the end of our very short What We've Been Watching segment this week. We got a lot more stuff to get to, so let's get to our next segment, the Slash Film Court. All right, here we go. The Slash Film Court is the quasi-regular question mark.
It's been a while.
It's been a while.
It's been a
while
while
since the last Slash Film Court. But it is
first of 2019 for sure.
The extremely irregular segment whereby we adjudicate your movie-related dilemmas. Of course, you can always write into us at /filmcast@gmail.com. And this week's Slash Film Court dilemma comes in from Maddie Grohl from Boston, my old stomping grounds. Maddie writes in, my girlfriend and I recently had a debate about movie-going that I'd love your opinions on. Both she and I have AMC A-list subscriptions, so we go on movie dates to AMC fairly regularly. The plus side is that AMC made movies really cheap. The downside is we have to sit through the 20-plus minutes of commercials that play in AMC theaters. Add that to getting to the theater early to get a decent seat. We end up sitting in the theater for 2.5 hours. Like Jeff, I'm also spoiler and marketing averse, though not quite to his extent. Recently, however, our local AMC in Boston upgraded to reserve seating so that we are now able to book our seats in advance and not worry about getting to the theater early. I also reasoned that if we show up 20 minutes after the scheduled showtime, we can get to our seats right as the movie starts. So last week, we did just that. It worked beautifully. We walked in right as the Universal logo popped up, and the movie started as if it was playing just for us. Finally, I was able to get the experience of the unsullied lifestyle in all its glory. But it was too good to be true. After the movie, my girlfriend told me that she felt awkward about getting to the theater right as the movie was starting. She thought it was disruptive to the fairly full theater because we had to brush past people who were already seated. And since it's winter in Boston, we had to fidget with our coats, hats, etc. as we sat down, surely making noise during the opening logos. I argued that the film hadn't really started yet, so it was fine, but she was unconvinced. We compromised, and the next time we'd show up 10 minutes after the scheduled showtime, thus kissing the unsullied lifestyle goodbye. So what do you think? Is it okay to enter a movie right as the movie starts in order to avoid the trailers, or is that too disruptive to the people who did show up early and have been comfortably seated for 20-plus minutes? Thanks for the consideration. That comes in from Maddie Grohl from Boston.
Yeah.
Marty.
Sorry, Marty. Apologies.
He even gave you a pronunciation.
He gave me a pronunciation guide. I blew right past it.
Come on.
That's completely my bad.
I love this question, though, because I think it's a very relevant one. The Alamo Drafthouse. The whole reason you cannot even enter a screening once a movie screening starts is because they don't want people to be disrupted, which is kind of insane, by the way, because they start that timer when the trailers start. So it's a bit much.
Well, let me just before you rule on this matter, Devindra. I do have to say, first of all, two things. Number one, Alamo Drafthouse, one of my favorite places in the whole world. Like, love. I've been there 3 or 4 times. I've enjoyed every single one of my experiences there, okay? Number two, an equally related thing to that is that I think it's pretty rich for a place to emphasize no using cell phones, show up before the trailer, et cetera, but then have people dropping checks like 2/3 of the way through the movie.
We've made this point before, but I think the servers are more disruptive than people coming in early, for sure.
Agreed. Here's what I don't understand about Mahti's problem. He specifically says he went to an AMC theater. The AMC theater has a bumper between the end of the trailers and the beginning of the movie. I often will stand outside the movie theater, outside the actual, that
what we call
screen.
The cool kids line. Yes.
Yeah, awkwardly standing. It's great too when it's something like Lego Movie 2, or a kids movie.
Yeah, I'm not a creep. Not a creep.
Yeah, I'm by myself on 11 o'clock on a Tuesday.
My hands are out of my pockets.
I'm just standing here in front of the entrance. Nothing weird about it. Waiting for the movie to actually start. No, but you can time your entrance.
Yes.
And you actually get a wonderful audio cue when it's like dun, and then the popcorn guy shows up, and we're doing the AMC now it's time for the thing brought to you by Pepsi, and there's bubbling Pepsi and all this. That is the perfect moment to take your seat, and one I often take advantage of because that lasts a good 45 seconds. Plenty of time, especially if you go in early and scope your seat out. You know where you're headed. It's an opportunity. It doesn't really answer his question, but it really should be the preferred strategy.
I feel the need to interject after what Jeff just said. 2 things, Jeff. Number one, I think it's hilarious that you said Pepsi because literally every one of those thousands of times I've seen it, it's been Coke.
I specifically didn't say the thing that they do, but whatever.
So clearly the branding worked on you. And then the second thing is, I wouldn't necessarily take Jeff's experience as the norm of how you should handle this kind of situation. Now, that being said, it sounds like this guy is very much in your court with the Unsullied lifestyle, right?
You gotta explain that. What do you mean?
Yeah.
What do you mean that you wouldn't take mine as the? What are you talking about?
Standing outside the theater, that's like pretty intense, Jeff. I mean, I just usually go in and don't look.
I'm surprised you're not doing this, Dave. Aren't you like half Unsullied?
Yeah. I usually I go into the theater and I just don't look. Right, I just don't look at the screen.
You don't look at the giant flashing screen.
No, I look at the side. Yeah. I pick a point on the side of the theater in my periph. Right, and I just look at the side of the theater.
Weirder. I think this is stranger.
He just stares at the person sitting next to him.
On the side, no, like at the edge of the screen, guys, not like next to me. Don't be
stare intensely at the ear of the stranger sitting adjacent to you.
Yeah,
let's just say you're both weird. How about that?
That's fine.
Okay, so let's say quickly. Yeah, Monty, I do want to say I love this letter because it shows how considerate he and his girlfriend are being. Because nobody in the theater even thinks about this. But I think the judgment really comes down based on what kind of seats are in these theaters. If this is a nicer AMC with like the recliner seats and a nice amount of spacing between the front of the seat and the seat in front of you, like so there's actually an aisle to walk through. It's like it doesn't bother me at all. I think it's totally fine to like come in, even if the movie has started. That's to me, it's fine. I'm sure other people have other judgments. If it's an older style theater where you have to literally have the entire row get up for you to get in, that's a bigger problem, right? I think that's annoying.
In that situation, I often will judge my strategic approach movie to movie based on the juxtaposition of the seats, my chosen seat, and the level of patronage of that showing. So if it's a sold out show, I will take my seat early and do the Dave, close my eyes and plug my ears plan. I'm not above doing that.
Well, I think we're going to have a split ruling here on the Slash Film Court is what it looks like, because I submit to you that there is absolutely nothing wrong with getting into the movie theater and taking your seat and inconveniencing everyone so long as it is before the actual movie has begun. Yeah. That is my opinion. Like, inconvenience people all you want before the movie has begun. Once the movie has begun, that is sacred time. People have paid for that time.
You have to define movie has begun, because are you talking production company logos?
Yes, production company logos is when the movie has begun. Right?
Okay. Well, that's what he's talking about. He's saying that I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying that you have to go in during the AMC last chance to get your soda.
Yeah. Well, this person's Marty's girlfriend's compromise, or his compromise with his girlfriend, is that they get in there like 10 minutes into the movie, which I think is a great solution. I think the disadvantage for Marty is that in that situation he doesn't get to avoid all the trailers, which that's the reason it's a compromise. You don't get everything you want, and I think
I got a new product for you guys. It's horse blinders for the Unsullied. It also comes with noise canceling headphones, and you just like walk around in this like zero space.
I mean, I would be lying if I said I've never used noise canceling headphones in the theater to avoid trailers.
I've walked down the street. I've seen the horses wear these horse blinders, and the first thing I thought of was David Chen and Jeff Kanata. It's like, this is exactly what they need.
Because of how regal they were, right?
We want the opposite of horse blinders. Horse blinders force the horse to look forward.
Yeah, a complete visor. A complete visor.
Yeah, basically. we want inverse horse blinders.
Inverse horse blinders.
Just blinders.
You only see the sides of your vision.
Exactly. And I think we're not above merchandising on the Slash Filmcast. We could make a fortune on inverse
with a giant logo.
Yeah, we'd also create like tons of accidents with people taking the reverse horse blinders challenge. On YouTube.
Get your officially licensed Slash Filmcast inverse horse blinders. Except no other inverse horse blinders. Only the inverse horse blinders with the Slash Filmcast logo are the ones you should try.
Yeah. Well, look. Here's how to create your own. Take a pair of those 3D glasses. Just forget to recycle them. Just forget. Right. Go home. Just draw on them with black magic marker. Right. just like go wild. And then take that back into the theater. Those are your new theater shades.
Devindra, let me ask you this question, Devindra. So, I mean, I think we're pretty close to a ruling, right? That in general, we think it's okay to enter the movie. Like you must be seated, no coats, no food. Sure. You're not moving around. when the movie begins, and we define the movie start as the production logo of the movie begins. And here's why, by the way. Let me just clarify, like, why I think it's production logo is because that is when theoretically you might have score or soundtrack music begin, right?
Yeah.
And that is, in my opinion, that is part of the movie.
The cool relook of the WB logo. You know, they changed the WB logo into the cool like Dark Knight version or the Mad Max version or whatever, you know.
Have you guys seen that Onion story? There's this amazing Onion story that says it's entitled "Cool Glitch Effect on Movie Studio Logo Must Mean Shit About to Go Down." So yeah,
it's true.
So when movie production logo, that is when you are done. So I think in general, Devindra, do you agree that that's okay? Because that means like theoretically during trailers they can still be inconveniencing people, right?
I mean, yeah. That's the whole point of trailers, right? Is that people, this is the setup. Like you were pre-launch, and once you've launched in the movie, it's not fair. I will say though, we've all had those moments where we're just maybe a little late to the movies. Maybe this is a separate question. I do think any regular moviegoer needs to practice the art of the slip in. Okay, and just know how to jump in there. If you don't have a reserved seat, you're going to have a bad seat, unfortunately. I like to go straight to the front of the theater in that case and just inconvenience as few people as possible.
Wow.
But you got to learn that.
What you do see is you go to the concession stand and you get yourself you go to the self-serve butter station and you grease your legs up real good. And then you just slip right in. You just like zip right down the whole row of people. Zip! They don't even notice.
Mm.
And
that's actually very heartwarming. It's heartwarming that you have sacrificed your viewing experience so that others may have a good viewing experience.
It happens all the time. Also, I don't mind the very front row. I think depending on the theater, the very front row can be an amazing experience.
Almost never, but yes.
The only place I've seen a good front row experience is at the ArcLight in Los Angeles.
ArcLight's good. Also, any Alamo theater, actually, the front row is the only ones with reclining seats usually. And the screen is usually far enough away from the front row where you see the whole thing. You know, that's kind of the whole point. Also, the Dolby cinemas always have great front rows. Like, there's a huge gap between the seats and the screen usually.
Also, I want to go circle back real quick and say there is demonstrable evidence, empirical evidence for why the trailer is still acceptable for movement and getting to your seat. It's because 99% of movie theaters, the lights are still up during the trailers.
Yeah, that's true.
The lights go down during that buffer thing where it's like, okay, and now your main attraction.
Yes,
and that's how you know.
For sure. That's totally a sign. By the way, never turn on your phone's flashlight. I think that is also unacceptable. Yeah. I see that all the time. All the time.
The solution, right, Devindra, is you wait until there's a bright scene during a trailer.
Yes.
Right? And then pick out your spot and then get
I've seen it happen even when the movie has started. And that's what tends to annoy me because like art cinemas, especially indie cinemas, they don't have huge expansive seating. You kind of have to cramp yourself in there. What you got to do like the nighttime how to see the stars thing, like just close your eyes for like 30 seconds to let your eyes adjust. Do that, please. Like don't make a suffer with your damn cell phone light.
Okay, so to summarize all this advice, right? Like first of all, this person Marty should be paying us for all these wonderful.
This is years of experience.
Years of experience. We're just dropping for free on the internet right now.
Or he could just invest in our brilliant merchandising of the inverse horse blinders.
So, couple tips from Devindra and Jeff, right? Is like close your eyes, let your eyes adjust to the dark. Potentially consider standing outside and avoiding the trailers until you need to go in. But I think we all agree that when that movie logo, use the AMC pre-roll as a way of knowing. Oh, got to start making my way to my seat now. You know, like gotta get to the seat. But I think we all 100% agree that when that movie logo begins, when the movie studio logo begins, you must be in your seat, completely situated, not moving, ready to go. Yes?
Agreed.
So
yes.
Ruled, so ordered. That is the ruling of the Slash Film Court. And of course, you can always write in with your dilemmas at slashfilmcast@gmail.com. So that's it for the Slash Film Court. Before we get to our review of Velvet Buzzsaw, followed by our After Dark about Burning, we got to thank all the people who donated to the podcast this week. We got to thank subscribers at the rate of $2 per month, Jesse R. Bernoudi and Travis Routman. Thanks so much for your contributions. Thanks also to donors Mark Griffith and Mizan and Flora from Toronto, Canada, who sent in this note. Flora sent in this note to accompany this donation. This letter is years overdue since my husband Mizan has listened since almost the beginning, and he's begrudgingly pulled me along through the years to the point I might enjoy your company even more than him. I don't like entertainment podcasts generally, but yours just feels like we're hanging out with friends we've known since we were kids. We've been friends since the age of 10. My husband is a stoic guy who doesn't smile easily, so seeing him grin when Jeff freaks out over minor indignities, or smile at my delight in Dave's disdain for Jeff's limericks, is magic for me. As the long-suffering wife of someone who spends way too much time online, I want to thank your respective partners who share your time so generously with your listeners. We're grateful to benefit from your humor, film insights, and above all, humanity that is often absent from the internet, and you're fortunate to be married to such patient and supportive women. Congratulations on making it through 500-plus episodes. Looking forward to many more car rides with you guys.
I want you to know, Flora, that I read that when we got it out loud to my wife. And she nodded knowingly, and I think she appreciated that very much. So that was very sweet, and it's wonderful to acknowledge that we are only here, but for the grace and patience of our significant others, which is for which I am at least eternally grateful.
You know, I was listening to Malcolm Gladwell do an interview with Freakonomics podcast. You guys ever listen to that podcast?
Oh, yeah.
Fantastic podcast.
Yeah.
And he was saying something about the 10,000 hour rule, right? You guys heard about Malcolm Gladwell's, like, he kind of helped to popularize this idea of the 10,000 hour rule.
Yeah.
You need
It's horseshit. It's horseshit, but it's...
I'm also kind of sick of him in general, Mr. taking money from the cigarette industry, but yes.
For sure. Oh, for sure. But he says, like, the 10,000 hour rule is often misinterpreted, right?
Yeah.
That that a lot of people think, like, he's saying, like, oh, you need to do 10,000 hours to be good at something, and one of the many points he's trying to make is that it takes an extremely specific and special set of circumstances for someone to be able to do something for 10,000 hours, right? That, like, they need to have a whole support network or a government that's helping them out so they can play chess for 10,000 hours, or, you know, whatever. Like, or they need to have, like, extremely supportive people in their lives so that they can do what they're doing for 10,000 hours.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And I don't think we've done. We might have been watching movies and podcasting for 10,000 hours, right? That's probably a pretty reasonable.
Probably
pretty reasonable. Like,
I don't know how you break
that
that down.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But certainly one of the only reasons we can do it is because of the people in our lives that support us, and that deal with it takes time and effort to do the show, and it takes people taking care of kids or making dinner or doing whatever to make it so that we can bring the show to you every week. And we appreciate all those people in our lives. So, and we also appreciate our listeners who are donating to us and helping us defray the cost of doing the show. You can always donate by going to paypal.me/filmcast. That's paypal.me/the-word-filmcast. You can also go to /film.com. Click on the /filmcast tab. Use the PayPal links on the side of the page. We never want you to donate if it is in any way a hardship for you or causes you significant inconvenience. But if you have some cash to throw away, we really appreciate it. So thanks so much to all of our donors. Let's get to our review of Velvet Buzzsaw with April Wolf. That is a wrap.
Right, dudes. Yeah.
All right.
I will talk to you guys next week.
Yeah.
All
so
right, man.
Lego Movie.
Yeah.
Next week, and possibly Cold Pursuit. Is it playing at the theater that's across from your house that I've heard exists, Jeff?
I have not checked, but I'm assuming so.
Okay.
But yeah.
Did you watch Lego Movie with your kids by any chance, or did you see it by yourself?
I saw it by myself with about 1,000 kids. It
Great.
was crazy. Yeah, I was wall-to-wall kids, but
I always love that.
Me
Yeah.
feeling like the worst dad.
Is there like, I'm just curious, is there a reason you couldn't take Jack to go see it?
He's too young.
It's too young?
He would not have.
Yeah.
He would. My son has never seen a film. We barely do screens at all for him. He's never seen a movie start to finish. He would not sit in a seat for the running time of that film.
I see.
Yeah. Maybe in a few years.
Mm-hmm.
All right, dude.
man.
Well, thanks for joining us, Jeff. A lot of fun as usual. See you next
All right,
week.
guys. Take care. Bye.
Later. All right, I'm gonna run to the bathroom. Be right back.
All right, we're going to take a quick bio break and be back in 2 minutes. People listening to the chat room, we'll be right back with our discussion of Burning. Okay. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone in the chat's doing well. Dave, if you're reading this, it's because of you. It makes the Pats winning the Super Bowl less painful because I know you said on a Periscope you root for the Patriots. Well, thanks, Douglas. I am from Boston, but I don't take it too seriously.
I'm back.
Okay. Dan, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey.
You're on with Devindra.
Howdy.
Great. Hi, Devindra. How you doing?
Doing okay.
Good to talk to you again.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. The Amazing Spider Talk. That's how we should introduce you, right, Dan?
Sure.
Do we need to do a pre-spoiler segment? I think we can just say we all really like the movie, right? I mean, you should watch it.
I would, yeah, just maybe brief thoughts. Yeah, basically. But
Okay.
I don't know how you talk about this without spoilers.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's so hard to talk about without spoiling it. So
I will give people reasons to watch this movie.
Okay.
How about that?
all
Before
right, that
spoilers?
sounds good.
Yeah.
Here we go. Ready? Hello and welcome to the Slash Filmcast After Dark, where we talk about a variety of random topics. This week we're going to be talking about Lee Chang-dong's new film, Burning. I'm going to read the plot summary from IMDb. Jong-soo bumps into a girl who used to live in the same neighborhood as him, who asks him to look after her cat while on a trip to Africa. When back, she introduces Ben, a mysterious guy she met there, who confesses his secret hobby. This is the Slash Filmcast, and joining us today on this podcast for the After Dark is Dan Gvozden, the host of the Amazing Spider Talk podcast. Dan, welcome back to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm thrilled to be here. I'm doing fine. How about you guys?
Doing good. And the reason I invited Dan on was because I was tweeting about this movie the other day, and Dan responded like he had seen it at apparently the same time as me. Kind of creepy, Dan, trying to imitate my viewing habits.
Did we get on the same like online screener list? Perhaps.
I bought it from iTunes. That's how I saw.
Yeah, it was $10. It's $10 on
Yeah.
iTunes. Do it.
Yeah, check it out. So it's very difficult to talk about this movie without talking about spoilers, but I will just say I think it's a movie that we all would recommend you see. And Devindra, you have some thoughts on like why we should see this movie, right?
Definitely. It's I will say it's not a movie for everyone.
Yes.
Like I'll admit that fully. It is a slow burn thriller, but it has so many elements that I really enjoy. Specifically just like a really deliberate pacing. I think it builds up a mystery really well. Also, it's based on a story by Haruki Murakami, who's one of my favorite authors, and I think this is the best Haruki Murakami adaptation I've ever seen. There was Norwegian Wood a couple years ago, and that didn't end up so well. His stories are just so weird, and like there's a lot of like magical realism. There's a lot of like weird imagery and stuff like that. It doesn't always work cinematically. This movie kind of brings it all together. And I have not seen any of Lee Chang-dong's other films, but from what I hear, they're all amazing too. So, like, yeah, a lot of reasons to do this if you are interested in a really nice cerebral thriller.
All right.
I might add also, like, if you do give it a shot, please stay through the third act, because this is one of those movies where the first two acts are all like details that you might not think are adding up to something, but they most definitely are. In a way that I've not seen a more satisfying payoff, I think, for, I guess, an art house movie than this one in quite a while.
I wanted to like go back and rewatch this movie immediately once it ended.
Yeah,
just to like piece it all back together. Yeah.
So this is a movie I watched with my wife, and for the movie is 2.5 hours long, and for the first like 2 hours and maybe 10 minutes, my wife and I gave each other a couple looks at random points, and we're like, "Really? Is this like?"
You're like, "Is this Roma all over again?"
Well,
yeah.
No, actually, Roma is a movie I loved.
But like the first part of Roma, where you were questioning. Why you were
yeah.
there.
This is a movie where we had lots of people had said like this is one of the best films of 2018, and we're 2 hours into this movie, and we're like, "Really? Is this like when does the best part start?" You know, like that's what we thought. But then by the end, I'm like, okay, that movie is incredible. You know, like that movie is amazing. It's a movie that's going to reward repeat viewings. It's a movie that has stayed with me many days after I've seen the movie. and is a movie I want to talk about so much that I'm like, let's do this After Dark on it. So let's get to it, shall we? Let's get to spoilers for Burning, right? So we're going to spoil Burning, and we got to spoil Burning because, like, really the movie revolves around a central mystery, right? That a central question in this movie. Like,
also it's hard to spoil because we don't quite know.
Yeah, we don't even know what
know.
we don't even know what it is, right? We don't even know. But I think, like, for me, the big question in this film, right, is did Steve Yeun's character, did Ben kill Hamey? Right? That's the big question, I think.
I think that all the signs in the movie kind of point to that, basically.
I think so.
That's not the question I'm asking.
Yeah, what's the question you're asking?
I'm asking, can we believe any of these people? I don't think any of these characters are trustworthy in any regard. Like, this movie, to me, it's all mirrors. You know, everything is the opposite of something else. And every hour that I think of this movie, I come to a different conclusion. And it's not even about who murdered this woman, whether she was murdered or not. She could just be in Africa again. Like, I'm coming down to saying, can I trust that this woman wasn't distrustworthy herself in the first place? Or can I even trust that these two men that I'm seeing both exist? I've really gone down the rabbit hole.
Wow, that's pretty intense, Dan. I don't know if I'm going to go that far.
You're going super deep here.
But before we get to the central mystery, let's point out a few kind of interesting elements of the movie that kind of, like, when I first saw it, I thought, oh, this is just kind of a plot development that may or may not add up to something, and then later on I'm thinking, oh, I guess it really does have meaning.
Yeah, you mean Chekhov's closet of knives?
Yeah, Chekhov's closet of knives, like his so I think like Jong-Soo's father, right, has a closet of knives, has a history of violence, right, and that there's this idea of, like, violence being passed on from the father to the son, right, that this kind of violence is inherited and may have driven Jong-Soo to some of the actions we see later on in the film. There's this whole kind of economic backdrop to the film, right? In South Korea, what's great about this movie, right, is I've read, I don't know, a dozen essays about this movie, so I'm just kind of spitting out, like, a bunch of random things that I've seen that I liked, or observations that I've liked. But one of the things is, like, it puts the lie to the idea that there's, like, a monolithic Asian experience, right? You see movies like Crazy Rich Asians, and it's like, oh, all Asians must be like that. And it's like, nope. You have an Asian here, a Korean, like possibly a Korean American, played by Steve Yeun. He has an American name, Ben, right? And apparently, I'm not a Korean speaker, but apparently the way he speaks Korean is very much the way an American would speak it. Like, it's someone who, when he speaks it, you recognize that he's not a native speaker, right? So he kind of inhabits this other world where he's not quite South Korean, but he's not exactly American either because he's living in South Korea. There's the whole North and South Korean divide with, like, propaganda being, like, being spewed at Jong-Soo, like, all the time, as long as he can remember.
Just the sound of nature,
right?
Yeah,
the sound of nature, but also, like, sorry, I meant to also say, like, the class stratification, right? Ben is super rich, and Jong-Soo is not, and, like, the way that the film uses set dressing and production design and so on is really skillful, right? That you see this like, harsh difference between these two like, ways of life. And you hear in the background, like, unemployment is at a record high, and for youth, like, there's all this disaffected youth, and what are they doing in the world? And their lives kind of amount to not what they had hoped for. And then there's also obviously, like, the gender politics part. There's that speech that one of Hamey's coworkers gives about how this is no country for women, and women are expected to be, very beautiful, but if they are too beautiful, then men put them down, and if they're dressed too casually, then men put them down, and it's like there's an impossible balance for them to strike. So those are just like many of the undercurrents of what's happening here. And it reminded me in that way of, like, Widows. Like, there's a lot, like, going on underneath the surface plot of that film. But really in Burning, like, not very much actually happens in the plot of the film, right? Like, there's not that many developments. There's all these ideas that are brought to life in a really interesting way in the conflict of these three people. So I've been talking quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that's what's really powerful about it, right? Like, because this is a movie that just feels like you're watching this guy. He's really down on his luck. He's not making much money. I think he is like the prototypical millennial experience right now too. So
yeah,
like even
it's
outside
great.
of Korea,
The first scene of the movie, right? He's introduced as a laborer, right, in a long continuous shot, and
he's delivering, like he's a deliverer basically. Like he's just delivering packages. But I think like also the class stratification just becomes so clear super quickly, where you see once you're introduced to Ben, like he just has a completely different way of speaking and living, and the way he, like, basically we don't know where his money comes from.
Yeah.
And that's also like, that is a thing today too. Like it's, be it influencers or whoever, like there's a cadre of people, all the people who could afford to go to the Fire Festival, basically, who we don't know where their money comes from. We don't know what's happening. And it's hard not to feel jealous and annoyed if you're working from the bottom and seeing this just like, this wealth up top where they don't seem to be having to work at all for it or anything.
There's
like,
a lot of resentment.
There's a lot of that.
There's a lot of resentment, right? And in the way that Steve Yeun's character can casually disregard the law. There's a scene where he offers to smoke marijuana with them, right? And that it is a highly controlled substance in South Korea. But the fact that he can just casually do it, who gives a shit? He can do it. It's fine.
It's like whatever.
It's an indication of his privilege. Same.
I like how.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dan.
I like how he expresses that he has never cried before. Like he has no experience.
He's never experienced tragedy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and when asked about his work, he describes it as I can't really describe it to you. I play, and it's
play. Jesus.
Inherent mirroring of work and play. These two opposites.
I think I agreed with you about that mirroring part. I do think that the part about him never crying is a good indication of his sociopathic. Possibly sociopathic tendencies, right? Like
this is basically that's when this movie is basically like South Korean Psycho, basically.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, that performance is chilling, right? Like it is
so
a very
good.
chilling. He's completely like seems emotionally detached.
The way he laughs, the way he giggles is just like
the way he yawns.
Christ.
That guy could murder you and not feel a thing about it, right?
And the yawn, by the way, is the tell. The yawn is, oh, I guess I'm tired of this girl now, so I guess I'm just gonna do the thing. I'm gonna go find another like healthy flower to worship or something.
Well, the thing with the girl, so I view that as very different than you. I think like what's going on in that scene, right? There's a couple scenes where Steve Yeun's character Ben brings a girl into his circle of friends, and essentially, what he's doing, in my opinion, is he and his friends are basically gawking at this person.
Oh yeah, they have the center of attention there. Yeah,
but she's from a much lower class, right, than they are, right, and about Haimi that she's like very in debt, that she needs to work as this dancer girl, drawing raffles in front of stores to make money, and she's not in a good economic situation. She's from a different class, she's just from imagine if you were like hanging out, like if it was like a bunch of like Silicon Valley bros and like they brought like a waitress, to like hang out with them. It'd be like that kind of dynamic, right? And agreed with you that the yawn shows that he's like getting bored of it, but I think that's fundamentally what's happening is he's bringing these girls in and gawking at them. I mean, why don't we share our interpretations of what's going on at the end of the film, right? I'll start. I mean, I think that probably the most easy interpretation is that Ben has murdered Haimi, right?
Yes.
That's
and
probably
he's been doing this for a while.
And he was doing this for a while because he says to Jung-soo, he says, "Hey, I burn greenhouses all the time. It's like abandoned buildings that no one cares about, right?
Yep.
And I burn them, and like you'd be surprised how quickly you can just make them completely vanish." And of course, he's not talking about actual greenhouses. He's talking about. I mean,
people. He could also be talking about actual greenhouses, but I also think, it's clearly the metaphor for these forgotten women.
He describes her as vanishing into smoke as well.
Yes. Right, right. He's talking about these forgotten women that have been forgotten by society. Right. That hey, I can just make these people vanish without a trace. And no one cares. And then of course, like Jung-soo's like, well, I checked all the greenhouses near me, and he's like, hey,
he's so
maybe you should have
adorable.
checked closer. Maybe really, really close.
Like really, like Bond villain-esque. Like really, just can you read what I'm saying, kid?
Are you picking up what I'm putting down, Jung-soo? And so it's greenhouses that like the greenhouses are people. Now,
And by the way, like, it's people full of life. It's people with a lust for life. And it's like the whole thing, Haimi kind of breaks down, right? Like, the reason she goes to Africa is to explore their people who are looking for, what was it?
The Great Hunger. The
Great Hunger and Little Hunger, right?
Yeah.
And it's like Little Hunger is like the basic sustenance. Great Hunger is like finding a reason to live, finding a meaning for life. And to me, this entire movie is about Ben being basically a vampire, like a social vampire who just cannot, if he cannot cry, he probably cannot even find happiness on his own. So he's sort of like absorbing it from these women who are like very energetic and filled with life.
Right. Other evidence to support this reading of the film. There are little accoutrements, little souvenirs, right, in that drawer. And I freeze framed
boil.
The cat.
Yeah, the cat boil. Well, it's vague, right? But yeah, the cat boil. But the souvenir, I freeze framed it, and there is a bracelet that looks like a girl's bracelet with the name Michaela on it, right? So it's like clearly not just like one girl's stuff. It's multiple people's stuff, and so he's like taking these souvenirs. The cat boil, that's another great one that you guys mentioned. And then I thought to myself, well, it doesn't make sense because at the end of the movie, Ben says to Jong-soo, he says, "Hey, why did you call me out here? I thought you said I was going to meet you and Hae-mi here." That's what Ben says at the end of the movie.
Right.
And
well, he's just going along with the lie.
Well, that's
right?
the thing. If Ben is the killer, why would he like agree to meet Jung-soo and Hae-mi in the middle? Like, wouldn't he know that Jung-soo's lying?
It's the middle of nowhere.
Right.
It's the middle of nowhere. Like, wouldn't he have caught on to the ploy? And my wife's response to that was that Ben has acted with impunity his entire life. He's theoretically murdered many women and never been caught. So why would Jong-soo, this guy,
he's testing the system.
Yeah, why would Jong-soo, this guy who's like very passive and like hasn't shown himself to be violent at all, and can't even can barely like stand up for himself, right?
Like Jong-soo is completely irreverent to Ben, right, in a really interesting way, I think. Yeah,
I don't know if reverence is the word I'd use, but he understands.
It's very
Ben's
respectful.
Position. He understands Ben's position of power, I think.
Yeah, it's very respectful. Like, it's a very particular thing where he's always saying like "sir." He's always like bowing to him in a very specific way. Like, it's always in deference to Ben.
So why would he do that? And so that was my wife's response. Is like, well, it's because he's been acting with impunity. So that doesn't necessarily counteract that theory that Ben is not the killer. Now, I read a really interesting theory on Reddit that was kind of cool, which was that like that what Ben does is he helps women like restart their life, right? Like I
saw that thread on
right.
Reddit.
That's why like the
that
makeup
reminded
kit
me of why I don't go to Reddit for film analysis.
Well, I thought it was kind of interesting because he's like, oh, what do you do? You play, and then like that would also explain like why does he bring the girls to his friends? Because that's something that's weird for a serial killer to do. Like, introduce your friends to this girl that you're about to kill. It feels like it would leave a trail of knowledge behind.
It's showing off in a very specific way that I think sociopaths do all the time.
Yeah, sure. But I thought that was an interesting theory. I think there's like a lot, there's more evidence in favor of the he killed Hae-mi theory.
Yes, yeah.
But what is great about this film is that it leaves any of those options open. In my in my opinion, it does not definitively come down on any one of those sides. You can interpret it any way you want. Dan Gvozden, you said like you're just completely like this could all be a figment. Like at one point I thought maybe these are all figments of Jong-soo's imagination and he's writing his book. Like I did have that thought. But what is your thought on like what is the reality of the film?
Well, I mean, that's interesting because when I first finished the film, I was searching for the reality. That was like what I wanted to do. And ultimately I came to the decision that it doesn't really matter. Like, we're looking at this tangerine. It's either there or not, and you can choose to believe it's there or not, as kind of discussed earlier on in the film. And I think the movie is so much more interesting with Hae-mi being a Schrodinger's cat, that she's both dead and alive at the same time. She could just be anywhere, and then to accept that as your ending, that you're not going to know, that opened me up to a whole other like way of looking at the movie, which is to say, like, what is actually going on here between all these characters and their relationships with each other. And there's a lot of really strange, contradictory details that we're getting. So like, yes, David, like I want to agree that like he's a serial killer. and that's where all the clues are leading to. But I ultimately was like, it doesn't really matter. Like, the more interesting thing to me is like looking at the character of Jong-soo and how he's repeating the cycles of violence within his family, and he's creating his own narrative through like the books that he's reading and how he's interpreting the world. And then looking at what that means between the relationship between Ben and Jong-soo. We see later Ben is reading Faulkner and establishing a relationship beyond Hae-mi with Jong-soo.
It's also based on like a Faulkner story too. Like there's both a Faulkner and Murakami story called Barn Burning.
The movie seems very interested in like fractured narratives too. We get this kind of like story of the well that is both true and not true from
very Rashomon-esque. Yeah.
Right. And even the introduction of Hae-mi, when he meets Hae-mi, she says to him, "You might not recognize me because I got plastic surgery." And so even her identity is called into question. Like, is this someone that he knew from his past? Because he doesn't really seem to know it. And like, he doesn't even know his history with this person. And so, like, to me, everything is called into question. And even Jong-soo's past, there's a moment right at the heart of the film where we find about the greenhouses, and Jong-soo goes to sleep, and he has this dream of himself as a child burning a greenhouse. And it's like this intermingling of his own past burning his mother's clothes with this new imagery that he's incorporating. And like, I just, nothing, you can't take anything as a certainty in the film. And to me, that like opens it up for endless possibilities, which makes it all the more interesting. Like, I got so far down the rabbit hole with this thing over the past few days that I'm like, oh, like, Ben and Jong-soo are the same guy. Like, they go off to Africa and come back with this more primal, character. And at the end of the film, when he's burning his car, he gets naked and he's returning to nature and killing that part of himself. And
if this were an American movie, I feel like that it would be some sort of weird twist like that, rather than just letting this be. Yeah,
I'm not saying that it is that. But it got me thinking, like, oh, that's the exciting thing about this movie. I think about this in like a movie like last year's Mother, where like great art can operate both on like a surface level where you're kind of enjoying it, but it also is kind of endlessly interpretable and accessible, and that's what this film was to me. I know it's a longer answer than you were like, asking to like a simpler question, but like that's the journey of what elevated this film for me to something. I wish I had seen this last year. I know I came on your show to rave about Spider-Verse, but this is like now my new like. Oh,
I'm really sad I missed it last year too. Yeah, it was just came at a rough time, man. The middle of award season. I love that the specifics are so open in this movie, but really it is the broader like character imagery and themes here that I think are really interesting. Like this is a movie that kind of just boils down toxic masculinity to these two characters. Even our lead character, who before Hae-mi disappears, he calls her a whore. He says this is the sort of thing a whore does, and then she disappears. He's not a nice guy. He's the one we're seeing. He's the point of view we're seeing. He seems like a pretty meek guy, but at the end of the day, it's not like he was nice to her. She remembers him saying how ugly she was as a child. Like he crossed the street just to tell that to her. Like there's a lot of that, and this movie really is about like his. First of all, like he has a fling with her. And she goes off to Africa. It's not like they're boyfriend and girlfriend or anything. And he sees Ben and he's like both threatened and confused by Ben. And this movie is all about the breakdown of that kind of back and forth. Like Ben does not take this guy seriously. I think that's also why he just shows up at the end. He's like, what are you going to do, kid? Like, you're a farm boy. You have one cow. You can't do anything to me.
It reminded me of the dynamic between Matt Damon's Ripley character in The Talented Mr. Ripley and Philip Seymour Hoffman's character. Like who's what's his name in that movie?
I don't remember.
Frankie or something. It was something like that. But that basically you have this guy who's like pretending to be very, very rich and kind of in this world, and he's just really not pulling it off. And there's one guy who knows exactly. Freddie Miles.
Except like in this movie, Stephen Yeun is also pulling it off. He's both Frankie and Ripley, or not Ripley, but the Jude Law character, right?
Yeah, Dickie.
To your point, Devindra, like there is one murder that we see in this movie, and it is a murder committed by Jong-soo, and that's like about as much as I'm willing to commit to. Is like that's the murder we see. That's the act of violence that is actually concrete, and
he'll probably be punished for it, like his father was. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I think what Dan is saying is like that's the only thing we can quote unquote. Well, first of all, there was that scene when he's writing his book on a computer in Haimi's apartment, and I was like, wait, so is all this like a book from this point forward, or like it wasn't clear to me what is in the reality of the film, what's not. But then but to Dan's point, like the only one thing we see is that we know for sure is that if we assume that it's not a book that Jong-soo's writing, is that Jong-soo murdered Ben. And that was a beautiful scene. It takes place basically in one shot. And it's really powerful moment, like especially at the end. I don't know if you guys noticed, but like Ben embraces Jong-soo at the end. Like when he's definitely dead, like Ben like kind of pulls Jong-soo in.
Like you got
close.
me, bro. You got me.
Yeah, it's just kind of he's kind of like acknowledging that, like he's right. Devindra's like, yep, you got me, you know. And really, really intense sequence.
So can I speak to that embrace a little bit?
Yeah.
I'm curious about this because like I really think that these two make a whole together. They're both fill out each other's needs. You know, Ben has no complicated backstory. He's just kind of always been there. We get no details about him, whereas Jong-soo is this like intensely rich character. They're constantly operating in mirrors, and in that one moment they're brought together. I mean, whether it's through an act of violence or what have you. Like, there's just something there to these two characters and how they are both need each other in some way. I mean, I'm so tickled by the merging of their memories in that one dream sequence, and I'm curious what your guys' interpretation was of that. You know, and the fact that, you know, Ben seems so interested in Jong-soo beyond Hae-mi's involvement, that he's reading Faulkner and inviting and seeking him out. I'm curious about your interpretations of all this.
I agree that they are kind of like different sides of the same coin. You know, as Devindra, you pointed out, they're kind of like they reflect different elements of toxic masculinity in a way, assuming that Ben is actually a killer. But for the longest time while watching the film, I thought they were the same person, and that we were going to be revealed that it was like a book that he was writing and Tyler Durden style, like they're the same person. And there is some evidence for that. For instance, there's a scene when Jong-soo creeps up behind Ben standing by a lake, and then he's just like, he stands up, and then we just never see what happens after that, right? And then it cuts to Jong-soo waking up, and he's super tired. And it's like, well, what happened there? Because it seems like it was pretty important, right? So to me, I think I don't know that I don't think they are literally the same person in the realm.
No, I
film,
don't either.
Right?
I don't either.
But I think they do represent kind of different sides of the same of like what a modern, you know, man is in this environment with all the benefits and extreme violent downsides that entails.
Yeah. And both, like even if Ben is not, like, even if you don't think he's a killer, plenty of what he does, I think, is kind of shitty and maybe kind of gross. Like the way he kind of basically starts grooming these girls from a lower class, and basically the way he shows them off to his friends, I don't think is very nice. Like there's always something like subtly condescending about every single thing he does, and just kind of shitty about it. Whereas Jong-soo is, I think, more thinking like, oh, this, you know, I slept with this girl, and like I have a certain stake in her, I guess, like a certain ownership in her, and how dare this guy kind of do this? How dare this guy kind of creep in, and how dare she confuse me like this? There's a lot going on here.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a lot to what you just said, Devindra. And yeah, I think that's what I have to say on that topic. I do want to say, I think I actually have a lot more sympathy for this idea that he helps the girls become different people than you, Devindra. Like, I think that theory is actually pretty valid.
If you don't read into anything else he does in the movie, sure, but yeah, I think the movie drops enough hints that even if he's not a killer, I don't think it's essentially helpful or anything.
Well, so for instance, like the way she tells stories, she tells all these stories that are like, that we don't know if they're true or not. The story with the well, right? The story of him, Jung-soo calling her ugly, which like he doesn't seem to remember, and a few like this trip to Africa. The guy's theory on Reddit was basically that. She didn't even go to Africa, right? That she was like training with this guy Steve Yeun to like become someone else, and like she just goes. This would also explain why like this like really crazy story about the thing being held hostage and all that stuff. And
I mean, if you're going, where'd she go? Nairobi? Or
yeah,
Kenya?
I'm not saying that's not possible to happen. I'm just saying that like.
The movie gives us nothing to support that. That's the thing. Like I'm all for crazy, wild interpretations of a lot of movies, but you at least got to base it on like give me something in the movie that could kind of support that idea.
Well, I think the biggest here's the support of that theory, Devindra, is when he says like what do you do for a living? Oh, hard to explain. I like to play. You know, it's like okay, well that's a very plausible way that could be interpreted. And also that he brings the girls around to the thing, like, and I still think it would be like less likely for him to do that if he was a serial killer. And the makeup kit, right? Like, why would he have a makeup kit? You know, like maybe it's just his hobby to do makeup to girls, but like kind of weird.
And it's another form of control too. So
yeah. No, I'm not saying this. Look, I ultimately think the serial killer solution is the correct one. But I just think like there's enough there that you can doubt. Like that's what's so great about this movie is you can doubt everything. Was that really Boyle the cat? You don't know. Probably. You never see a photo of him. You never even see him before.
Cats never respond to anything. Occasionally,
that's
their
right.
Names. Like that's the thing.
Why would a cat respond to his or her name? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, no, I'm saying you can't. It's hard to call a cat.
That's right.
If you say their name, that is actually a better chance that they get you. Like that's one of those bits where it's like, okay, this seems to be the cat, and we saw
cats run to me all the time.
Yeah, right. Well, because they know you. Right.
Well, I mean, when I say their name, I mean.
Yeah. And also at the beginning too, like when all the cat stuff was there was cat poop in the litter.
But then you never saw the cat before that point. That's what's so awesome.
Saw the cat.
That's what's so awesome is you never saw it.
Hide in a 4-foot by 4-foot apartment.
Right.
Cats will find a way.
Was the cat actually even there at all? Right. That's the question.
There was cat poop in the litter, so it's like, well, you're going to great lengths to fake this. That could be a
but
thing
that's what
too.
I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Maybe she's faking everything, you know. And but of course, there's a lot of counter evidence to that too, like the fact that the idea that she's reinventing herself because the suitcase, the pink suitcase, is still there in the apartment. And so why would that be there if she's gonna go away and restart her life, right?
Like, did we ever see that door open in the background before?
Right. I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Hey, can I ask you guys one more detail? I really like this scene, but I have no idea how to interpret it. This scene where he reconnects with his mother, and she, seems to be implying that she is like turning tricks of some kind.
Well, it's more like she seems very like
financially
like
in a bad situation.
I don't know. She seems like a rich woman who's also very like not. I think not concerned with anything. She's like a very rich and aloof person, like she's not concerned with him at all, even though they're meeting for the first time in 15 years. That seems like a weird meeting too. Like it comes at a very opportune time, but I also like how he, he's disappointed in this, but he's using that moment to get more clues for the search or get more answers for his search.
Right. I don't know. I thought she talked about her money troubles, like that there were people trying to find her for money reasons, which I think was like the fact that she's dressed up super nice and has like a nice iPhone and a case is like an indication of how people try to project one image, but in reality they're a different thing. That was my take on that scene. But it was a bizarre scene, right? It's not how you'd expect a reunion after 16 years of no contact to take place.
Right. She's looking at her phone the whole time.
Right, like it just doesn't, it makes no sense, right? Like it's just like, why? I don't believe that would play out that way.
Well, I mean, it could. I've known people who that experience has definitely happened. Like it's definitely a believable thing, and also that ties into like the abandonment of his mother also ties into like how he would feel after he connects with this one random girl and maybe is, you know, a little broken when she comes back with somebody else and kind of abandons him in a way.
I feel like I'm going to watch this film 100 times to like try to figure out or get fixated on some detail each time. Like the last time I felt this way about a movie is like Zodiac, where I felt like the more I watch this movie, the more I'm going to be able to figure out who the Zodiac killer actually is. And like, this is one of those kind of things.
Yeah.
It's great. It's a great mystery. Also, like, shout out to all the lead performances. The girl who plays Hey Me, this is her first movie. This is her first on-screen credit. That's insane. I think she does a great job of like, her performance almost feels like Manic Pixie Dream Girl type thing. But there's that one scene, her dance in the sunset where, you know, she's dancing naked for herself, but also, you know, in view of both of these guys. There's so much going on there. And I think she brings a lot to that performance. And also Stephen Yeun, like a guy, you know, we mostly know for Walking Dead. He's shown up in a couple of movies. And most recently also in, what was it? Sorry to Bother You. And I love seeing him in things, but this is a completely next level performance. Like this is him doing the rich guy in Old Boy, basically. Like very on the same level for me. And the lead guy too, I know he's a very famous actor. Like he is very dressed down in this movie because I see photos of him in other things and he's like a very proper, handsome dude. So shout out to him for playing like I guess a more simplistic dude, less handsome guy than he actually is.
Yeah.
There's a very primitive thing about him. He's very like basic. There's something about it the way he holds his mouth that feels very like infantile and in a way. And it got me thinking a lot about like kind of Oedipus and reading that into this story in some way.
Or just like, he's just not worldly as like the rich city people are. Also, I want to say shout out to the slow chase in his giant truck behind Ben's Ferrari. That's clearly Ben is not a dumb guy. Like clearly he's tracking this one giant old truck that seems to be following him everywhere. It's like, okay, I think he was onto a lot of what was happening there. Just kind of hilarious that Jung-soo thinks he can follow Ben very closely too, like not employing any of the like known things you would do in a movie, like let's try to say 3 car lengths behind or something. He's just like right up there on the guy, assuming he would not notice his ugly old truck behind him all the time.
You gotta love stealth truck.
Gotta love it.
You know, there's a moment in Velvet Buzzsaw when Jake Gyllenhaal is looking at art and he describes it as mesmeric, which I don't even know if that's a word, but that is definitely the word that came to mind when I was watching the Hey Me dance sequence in the sunset. Just an incredible sequence that is filmed mostly in one long take, and it's just like it is this beautiful idea of this woman longing for more in her life, right, than she currently has, right? And it's beautiful and tragic, and depending on what you think happens to her at the end of the film, extremely tragic. But who knows? Maybe she just restarted her life somewhere different, Dra. We don't know. So
that is a possibility, sure.
Dan, you want to have the last word on this? Any closing thoughts on Burning?
I hope people listen to this after seeing the film. I can't stress that enough. I'm going to be watching this thing for the next 5 years. I think we talked about a lot of the stuff I wanted to discuss without taking us down a whole other rabbit hole.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's hard to spoil it because we literally don't know what happened.
Yes.
But also, what's the whole other rabbit? We probably don't have time for it. But what is the other rabbit hole that you had in mind?
Oh, I mean, I just like talking about like his family and father, and I have this whole thing about Ben being like his new father figure, and I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of things to go into here. None of it's fully formed because it's so hard to grab onto any of it. I'm curious about the nudity in the film and how it's used and utilized. I'm curious about Jung-soo looking at this image of light on the wall while he's having sex and what that implies. There's so much going on that we could talk about this for the rest of our lives and never really have a true grasp on it.
Indeed. All right. Well, that's going to bring us to the end of our After Dark. Thanks for listening. Dan, where can people find more of your work?
Yeah, you can listen to my podcast, The Amazing Spider Talk. It's all about Spider-Man and the history of the character and past, present, future. And you can follow me on Twitter at @SupSpiderTalk and read my writing in The Hollywood Reporter.
Thanks for joining us, Dan. It's been a pleasure.